Hello and welcome everybody to the second in our Sentient Sessions series, Nothing But the Facts, Fact Checking and Verification for Animal Rights Reporting. Thank you everybody for coming so far. Let me get things going. So I'm Anna Bradley, Executive Director at Sentient Media, and this is the second in our 6-part series. So thanks again everybody for joining us. Some of you already know us at Sentient Media, but for those who don't, we're a non-profit journalism organisation, and we seek to create transparency around the role of animals in our daily lives. So from food to companionship to laboratory test subjects and everything in between. We do this through reporting, through training programs for emerging writers, partnerships with news outlets, and through strategic digital marketing. And everything that we do is designed to create more entry points for people start asking questions about the corruption within animal industries, and for us that's particularly within animal agriculture. So our main training program for emerging writers at present is our Writers Fellowship program, where we work with people to get their articles created and placed in non-vegan media outlets. This year we've been placed in The Times, Wired, Guardian, USA Today, to name a few. We're at 90 fellows on our program now, and yeah, we designed this series with them in mind. We basically wanted to create a way for people to hear from people within and outside the animal protection movement. And today, we're welcoming the fantastic Christopher Sebastian, who is one of our Writers Fellows, one of our Senior Writers Fellows. He is an author, researcher, lecturer, senior editor at Vine Sanctuary Press. He is co-founder of VGN, which was what brought us into this session today, for those who logged in early. He also lectures at Columbia University in the Department of Social Work for the graduate course POP, Power, Oppression and Privilege. And today he's going to explain why fact-checking is so important, how to do it effectively, and why we must do it to create a better industry within journalism. We are going to be sharing the video of the session alongside a write-up with all the links that Sebastian's going to cover today, so don't worry about taking extensive notes. In fact, we're going to have a few pop quizzes which will pop up on your screen, so stay alert and take part. And please ask questions at any point throughout this session, as we will get to them during a short Q&A at the end. So thanks again for everybody who's showed up so far, and over to you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Anna, for that amazing introduction. Thanks to all of you who are participating today. I'm really glad to see so many faces here. I did not anticipate as many people would sign up for this presentation as ended up doing so. So I'm really grateful to everyone who chose to be here. I don't know how many of you are actually fellows for Sentient Media, or if you just wanted to participate because this is something that is near and dear to your heart. My background is in media, in journalism and media studies. And as soon as Anna had given me the opportunity to do this, I absolutely jumped on it right away, because I can't think of a more important topic to talk about right now. So I am not going to waste any time talking about myself. I'm going to jump right into the presentation. We have a lot of material to cover, and I will try to speak slowly and enunciate, but it's really difficult for me because I'm always nervous when I speak, and twice as nervous when I am just talking to a camera. I have no idea what's going on the other end. But you also have no idea what's going on my end. It's just it's just me from the waist up. And I could be tap dancing or whatever, from the waist down. So here we go. Sentient Media, nothing but the facts, talking about fact checking. But before we get started, I definitely want to make sure that we are all familiar with some key terms here. This first slide just explains the types of information disorder that we experience, or what I call the disinformation economy. There is misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And a lot of people confuse these terms. They're not completely interchangeable. Misinformation, as you can see from the Venn diagram on the screen, it is unintentional mistakes such as inaccuracies, photo captions, dates, statistics, translations, or when satire is taken seriously. Malinformation on the other side of the Venn diagram is deliberate publication of private information for personal or corporate rather than public interest, such as revenge porn, deliberate change of content, or excuse me, context, date, or time of genuine content. And right in between the two, the place where those two meet, that is what creates disinformation. Disinformation is fabricated or deliberately manipulated audiovisual content, intentionally created conspiracy theories or rumors, things of that nature. So like that, those are really important things to cover. And this will come up throughout the presentation over and over again. So I hope you're taking copious notes. Like Anna said, there will be pop quizzes periodically throughout. So moving on, other ideas or terms that you want to be familiar with are fact checking and verification. And a lot of people think that these are, again, interchangeable or that they mean the same thing. They do not. Fact checking and verification are two different but related tasks. And fact checking relies on information from experts, academia, or government agencies, and it results in adjudicated conclusion on a claim's veracity. Verification is what a lot of people think of, or excuse me, what a lot of people are actually thinking of when they're talking about fact checking. Verification is, however, different. It seeks primary evidence from eyewitnesses, geolocation, reverse image searches, all of that good stuff. And it results in a story being either published or stopped. And I just realized that like my punctuation here is abhorrent, but I apologize because I put these slides together like on like less than 2 hours sleep. And it's always like 5 minutes before presentation begins. Also, I told Anna that like I didn't realize until after the fact that this particular Venn diagram actually resembles the MasterCard logo. That was unintentional, but we are like, this is where we are. So whatever. In between fact checking and verification, that's where you get the good stuff, the seitan and potatoes, as I like to call it. That is debunking fake news and viral hoaxes, because both of them serve that same functionality, even though the terms are different. So like what we're also going to talk about is the difference between fact and truth. A lot of us really confuse fact and truth also, but like facts and truth are different, although related. Fact is indisputable, truth is acceptable. When Donald Trump, for example, says like, you know, if you say that like, you know, Black people are disproportionately killed at higher rates than white people in the United States at the hands of a militarized police, that is a statement that is factually backed up by statistics from the Department of Justice. And Donald Trump, in his interview with Chris Wallace last week, if any of you were watching that, when Chris Wallace had presented him with that fact, he responded by saying more white people are killed by militarized police, which I don't know how that makes it better, by the way. Like that actually makes it demonstrably worse. But like realistically speaking, like, you know, both of these things are true. But yeah, like it's about what the actual factual information is, because statistically speaking, yeah, Black people are disproportionately killed at higher rates because there are fewer Black people, but there are twice as many Black people who are killed. So although there are more white people by aggregate who are killed, when you actually break those numbers down, it is more dangerous for us to be Black people in the United States than it is for our white counterparts. And yeah, like we've got more information about like the difference between what is considered to be fact and what is considered to be truth. A fact is something that is indisputable, based on empirical research and quantifiable measures. Facts go beyond theories. They're proven through calculation and expertise. I'm covering up half of my screen here. Or there's something that definitively occurred in the past. Like, you know, you can say that World War II is something that happened. That is a definitive fact that happened in the past. Truth is entirely different. It may include that. It may include that, yeah. Like, you know, just like more white people are killed in the United States, but can also include belief. Oftentimes people will accept things that are true because they fall closer to their comfort zones. They're are assimilated easily into their comfort zones or reflect their preconceived notions of reality. Now, this was written by Larry Walsh in 2018. I just used it in the presentation because it doesn't benefit me to reinvent the wheel if someone else actually said it much better than I could. So there we go. Ricky Gervais is quoted here. If we took every science book and every fact and destroyed them all, in 1,000 years, they'd all come back. Why? Because all the same tests would prove or produce the same results. That is what makes something a fact versus something that is considered to be truth. And just moving on, like, you know, this is a really good article that some of you may have seen when I was promoting or like pimping out this, this talk. on social media. And some of you probably have seen this like shared a dozen times before. It's from The Independent. And people who are anti-animal really, really like to throw it in your face. You might see variations of this headline that say, "Sorry, vegans," or something along those lines. But this actually is a really good illustration of, like, of use of facts and use of truth. This is an article from The Independent. It says lettuce is 3 times worse than bacon for emissions, and vegetarian diets could be bad for the environment. But let's look at, let's evaluate this source. And we'll talk about evaluating sources in more detail later on in the presentation. But number one, this is coming from a reputable newspaper. If you plug The Independent, which is a UK newspaper, into a Google search or look for it on media bias fact check, you'll see that The Independent is it's fairly solid. You've got like the author's name, the journalist who wrote this piece. It's Adam Withnall. It's right there in the byline. And not only his name, but you also have his Twitter handle, so you know how to find him as well online. Also check the date of the article. The date of this is Tuesday, December 15th of 2015. So this article is 5 years old at this point, or coming up on 5 years. Which, by the way, when you're evaluating sources, try to use something when you are looking at information or statistics that's relevant to the past 5 to 10 years. Anything older than that, it's probably outdated. But yeah, so we've got this like delightful piece from The Independent written by Adam Withnall. And of course, it was like, you could see variations of it once again in different places. And you have information actually from the report here. According to new research from Carnegie Mellon University, following the USDA recommendations to consume more fruits, vegetables, dairy, and seafood is more harmful to the environment because those foods have relatively high resource uses and greenhouse gas emissions per calorie. Published in Environmental Systems and Decision, the study measured the changes in energy use, blue water footprint, and GHG emissions associated with US food consumption patterns. Eating lettuce is over 3 times worse. I can't believe that I'm reading this out loud with a straight face, and you probably can't believe it either because you had to debunk this. Most of you are already fact checkers in your everyday lives and you don't even realize it. But eating lettuce is over 3 times worse in greenhouse gas emissions than eating bacon, said Paul Fishbeck, professor of social decisions, sciences, and engineering and public policy. Lots of common vegetables require more resources per calorie than you would think. Eggplant, celery, and cucumbers look particularly bad when compared to pork and chicken. So there you have it. Like, this is like, this is a reputable newspaper published this article, and scientific reporting, it just ain't what it needs to be, because you just like, I don't have enough time to like talk about it in just this one presentation, but we can break it down a little bit if you all have time afterwards. But yeah, like, what people pick and choose like little bon mots from like, from scientific research, and they publish this in little sound bites that people want to hear. And what's behind that is confirmation bias. And we'll talk a lot about confirmation bias as well. But let's just look at what grist.org had to say about this particular article, countering like, the original piece or the original research. Grist actually says researchers compared the foods calorie for calorie, which can be misleading, and in this case was misleading. It is absurd to compare the environmental impacts between bacon and lettuce when you're using calories as the denominator. Brent Kim of the Johns Hopkins Center for Livable Futures, yada, 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 yada. A serving of lettuce has fewer calories than a stick of gum. In other words, you'd have to eat a huge amount of salad to equal the same number of calories you get from a few pieces of bacon. Just how many salad? Image of the chart. You need 93 cups of shredded lettuce to equal 4 slices of bacon. And that's what Grist had to publish about this. So yeah, like, what are facts and what is truth? Like, factually speaking, yes, calorie for calorie, like, lettuce is worse for the environment, but nobody is actually eating 93 cups of lettuce. So like, the truth of that is debatable. And it depends on who is actually wielding this information. If you are an anti-animal person who wants to really stick it to vegans, then like, you're going to probably stick to your version of the truth. And if you're actually a person who like has common sense, like myself and probably most of you, you already know, like, where you would find the truth. But a lot of us don't really care about that. It delves into the universe of alternative facts that you may have heard someone like Kellyanne Conway talking about in reference to the current White House administration. But again, that's another rabbit hole that we won't go down. Sorry, I'm going to take a really quick sip of my extremely large iced coffee beverage here because I'm parched. And again, I'm talking in a mile a minute, probably also because I'm drinking way too much iced coffee. But moving on, quote searches are something that you're probably going to do a whole lot of in your fact checking and verification journeys. And why? Because like quotes, you can't really write a piece without them. Like any piece that you ever write is going to be enhanced by doing really good, solid research and including lots of quotes from credible sources and credible people. So let's start looking at different quotes. This one right here is one that you've probably heard before. It's in this particular iteration of it, it is being used by PETA. It's about Gandhi. Everyone loves Mahatma Gandhi. Like in his total commitment to nonviolence, Gandhi always included the animals, stating the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. I'm not going to take a poll of people who may have heard this quote before or perhaps even used it yourself in social media. And I'm not even going to take a poll on like whether or not like, you know, you think this is true. Obviously, I've already set you up here. It's actually not true. There's no evidence that Gandhi actually said this. It's something that we like to think that he said. It sounds consistent with our beliefs about Gandhi, but it's actually not a true statement at all. What did Gandhi actually say about animals? Let's take a look at it because we've actually got letters that were published by him that we can refer back to. And so when you actually look into the facts and look into the actual information that we have available to us, rather than just relying on a quick Google search, you get a much broader picture of like, you know, of what people said and when they said it. The Mahajan may not allow dogs to stray. It is a sin. It should be a sin to feed stray dogs, and we should save numerous dogs if we had legislation making every stray dog liable to be shot. This is what Gandhi actually had to say about stray dogs. So like maybe it's true that like, you know, a society can be measured by how it treats its animals, but this is not it. This is not how we want animals to be treated. Even if those who feed stray dogs consented to pay a penalty for their misdirected compassion, we should be free from the curse of stray dogs. Imagine living in a world where being unhoused or houseless actually, like the punishment for that was summary execution. That's not a world that I would want to live in, like for any dogs or any human persons, irrespective of species. Like your existence on this planet without a physical street or postal address shouldn't, like, you know, like be one of the benchmarks for whether or not we get shot or put down. He actually went on to say a roving dog without an owner is a danger to society, and a swarm of them is a menace to its very existence. If we want to keep dogs in towns or villages in a decent manner, no dog should be suffered to wander. There should be no stray dogs, even as we have no stray cattle. But can we take individual charge of these roving dogs? Can we have a fringe rapport for them? If both these things are impossible, then there seems to me no alternative except to kill them. So, like, yikes on bikes. That is just not something that, like, you know, I want to think about. But this is what Gandhi actually said. These are physical letters that he's written that we can actually reference, that are thoroughly documented, versus that quote that sounds like something that Gandhi said. But like this is actually what, you know, a quote that Gandhi did say, in trying to speculate about how we had come to this place that like we think that Gandhi said something very kind about animals. There was kind of like a little mistranslation going on, or like we attributed like our own ideas or principles to it. This is the actual quote from Gandhi. The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. And like I said, like just speculating myself, somewhere along the line, it's very likely that we had inferred that like the most vulnerable members of our society are animals. And so therefore the quote got transposed, and it's kind of like a game of telephone. So like that's something that like, you know, that we should be mindful of, that we should be always vigilant about, checking our quote sources and making sure that the things that we think people said are things that they actually did say. Here's another one. This one actually is going to be a pop quiz. I'm going to describe this image to you. This is a variation of the Gandhi quote that Michelle Obama actually had said. The measure of any society is how it treats its women and girls. First Lady Michelle Obama, October 13th, 2016. So here's the question for the pop quiz. Does this quote require fact checking or verification? And now you've got your two options up on the screen. Does this quote require fact checking or verification? Think back to the earlier slides that we looked at and just take a few seconds to think about what it means to fact check something and what it means to verify something. And I am going to time it 15 more seconds. And wrap it up. Let's see what our quote let's see what our poll results are. All right, so does this quote require fact checking? 15% of you said fact checking, 85% of you said verification. I will say that the people who oh my God, we actually have a lot of participants. I didn't even know the numbers of people that are actually participating. But yeah, like the folks who said that verification would be correct. And the reason why they're correct, I'm just going to close this poll down now. But the reason why they're correct, and like this was going to be a tough question. You've got like a public figure like Michelle Obama, who's actually talking about this. She's a politician. She exists in the political universe. What do we say about fact checking? Academics, experts, or or politicians, and verifying that the claims that they said, or excuse me, making sure that we adjudicate the claims that are made. But don't get tripped up by the fact that Michelle Obama is a politician, that she's a government figure, or that she's part of a government agency. What we had to do in order to verify, or excuse me, in order to understand this, is we have to verify it. How do we verify it? Remember, reverse image searches, geolocations, and actual eyewitnesses. Allegedly, this actually took place on October 13th of 2016. There would have been people at that event where she was speaking at who heard her say this. There will be video evidence of her having said this. We'll be able to geolocate her presence at this event and know that Michelle Obama was there to actually have said these words. So yeah, like the folks who said verification, gold star for you. The folks who said fact checking, better luck next time. We're going to come back to this. This is not the only exercise that we're going to do. Matter of fact, moving on to the next slide, if I can actually make my computer go, I don't know. Let's see. Here we go. This is a fun one. Now, paying attention. These are two different quotes from the Right Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. The first one in the upper left-hand corner says, "One day, the absurdity of the almost universal human belief in the slavery of other animals will be palpable. We shall then have discovered our souls and become worthier of sharing this planet with them." That's the first quote. That's the first quote right there. The second one in the lower right-hand corner, "Never, never be afraid to do what's right, especially if the well-being of a person or animal is at stake. Society's punishments are small compared to the wounds we inflict on our soul when we look the other way." So here's the other pop quiz. Which one of these MLK quotes is real? Is it the top left or is it the lower right? "One day, the absurdity of the almost universal human belief in the slavery of other animals will be palpable." That's the top left. And bottom right, "Never, never be afraid to do what's right, especially if the well-being of a person or an animal is at stake." This is a really, really tough one. And you would likely have seen both of these floating around on social media at a given time, most concentrated around like mid-January when the Martin Luther King holiday is happening in the United States. But we do love our our civil rights leaders to be like ethically consistent. So which one is it? Let's see the results of the poll. Anna's doing a great job at this, by the way. We just tested the polling earlier. So we got 27%. This is like the American elections. I love it. 27% of you said the top left is the correct one. And 73% of you said that the lower right is the correct quote. I regret to inform you, but like everybody is wrong in this one. This was a setup. This was a complete setup. Both of those quotes are incorrect. Martin Luther King never said either one of those things. And I know that some of you want to fight me on this, and you're welcome to fight me. Absolutely. Look for it. Look for this being referenced someplace. You're not going to find it. There was a thorough analysis done of all of his speeches and all of his interviews. He never said either one of these quotes. What's particularly interesting is how strong confirmation bias actually is, and how our cognitive biases actually force us into a place where we want to defend something even if it's not true. There was a conversation that someone had gotten into online after they had discovered that this was like not a correct quote, and they were telling someone on Facebook that this wasn't correct, and they had actually referenced a blog post that I had made about one of these like Dr. King quotes, explaining how it was untrue. And this person actually insisted, no, it's a real quote. And how did they decide that it was a real quote? Once again, we'll talk about evaluating your sources. They decided that it was a real quote because they were able to Google it and find it on the internet. And so this person very patiently explained, well, like, yeah, you can find a lot of things on the internet, but everything that's written on the internet, unfortunately, is not true. And this person said, well, here, I found it actually in a book. It's published in a book, and that should make it correct. I've got bad news for you. Terrible people write books. People lie in books. People like Bill O'Reilly. I don't know how many of you are following American politics. People like Kellyanne Conway write books. People like Tucker Carlson write books, and the things that they write aren't necessarily true because they're written in a book. And this person had to find the quote in a book of poetry. So obviously, someone circa 2017 actually found one of these Martin Luther King quotes on the internet, and they included it in their book of poetry somewhere in the front matter of the book, because it's a lovely quote that never actually existed. But this person, in trying to do their due diligence, decided that this was an actual quote because they were able to find it having been published in a book that they found, again, on the internet. Self-publishing is a thing. Like, people making mistakes in books is a thing, unless this is actually a history book or a textbook, and even history books and textbooks we have to vet sometimes. Like, yeah, like that doesn't actually make it true. So like, be wary of where you get your quotes from. Next slide is actually not going to be a pop quiz. I'm sorry, I tricked you all, by the way. I had to do it though. I had to do it because that was just too good to pass up. But I'm not going to trick you again. I'll tell you in advance that there are not going to be any more like sneaky tricks on pop quizzes. All of them are going to be like legit Scout's honor from here on out. We're doing the right thing by you. This next one I actually wanted to include, and this is the last thing that I'm going to say about quotes before we move on to talking about images and false context. But like, this next one I wanted to include because it's a particularly insidious one. Most of you have probably seen this circulating around the internet, at least since the 2016 election. And it's a quote of Donald Trump. He says, if I were to run, I'd run as a Republican. They're the dumbest group of voters in the country. They believe anything on Fox News. I could lie and they'd still eat it up. I bet my numbers would be terrific. Donald Trump, People Magazine, 1998. Someone actually put a lot of work into this false quote. Why do I say that? Because they actually present it not just as a quote square, which is how we usually see things on the internet. They present it as a magazine article that someone had taken a screenshot of. And it's a real magazine. People Magazine does exist. And they attributed a date to it. They said that this happened in 1998. So it looks authentic because it looks like a screenshot of an actual physical paper magazine. And like, it sounds like something that we would expect Donald Trump to say, but nonetheless, this is not a real quote. So even if, and probably especially if we want to believe something, double and triple check it to make sure that it's actually real. Moving on, we're going to continue. This is actually another, I'm sorry, before we move on to false context, this is actually another pop quiz about fact check or verification. And I'm going to explain the image a little bit before we actually get into the quiz so that you know what all is going on. This was published by a vegan media outlet. I cropped out the name because the outlet isn't important. Like, we read articles all the time with varying levels of like true or like, you know, sometimes less than true information. The headline of it says, Europe's meat consumption has dropped 20% in 3 months. And then the article goes on to say, Europe's meat consumption has dropped by 20% in the space of 2 or 3 months, according to New Zealand red meat sector representative Jeff Grant. Grant is in London representing New Zealand's red meat industry ahead of Brexit, the UK's exit from the EU, currently set for October 31st. Now, this article was published circa April of last year. Obviously, we now know that, like, you know, the UK did not leave the European Union on October 31st. We had a whole election in December. We got Boris Johnson as prime minister. It is an absolute circus. And in January, that was actually the date that the United Kingdom had left the European Union. But what's relevant here is that this information, Europe's meat consumption has dropped 20% in 3 months. This is not true. I'm going to tell you that right off the bat. That didn't happen. And the reason why I know this is because that looked like a suspicious headline to me. and the like content in the article looked suspicious. And this is the difference between writing a journal, or excuse me, writing a blog entry and being a journalist. And most of you who are writing for Sentient Media should definitely be aware of this, because you're going to have to do your own legwork. A lot of us are not hiring fact checkers anymore. Even the New York Times is not hiring fact checkers right now. So journalists have to do their own due diligence when they're reporting information. And you can't just read something online and assume that it's true. Get in touch with that source. Many times we feel like these people who are like, who are sources actually exist in a separate universe than us. And they feel much more inaccessible than they actually are. You can email people. You can actually get information from people. Don't be afraid to reach out. Check your sources, get your information, and make sure that your receipt box is always filled to the brim. So like, here's the pop quiz for you. Let's ask the question, does this story require fact checking or verification? Does the story require fact checking or verification? Now remember what fact checking is. Fact checking is going to an expert, going to someone in academia, or looking at academic volumes, or referring to a politician or government agency to adjudicate the veracity of a claim. Verification, different. Verification is like, geolocation. It is reverse image searches. It's looking for firsthand eyewitnesses, or or people who were present at an event, to be able to verify information that was shared. So fact checking or verification. Let's look at the results. Wow. All right. So Anna, once again, Anna, thank you for this. So 92% of you said that this article would require a fact check, and 8% of you said that this article would require verification. The fact checking people overwhelmingly are correct. Yes, the system works. Democracy wins again. So here we are. Like, this story required a fact check. And fortunately for you all, VGN had done a fact check on this. VGN being the media outlet that I run with my partner. At the Red Meat, and this is what we had written. At the Red Meat Conference 2019, Grant stated that there had been a 20% drop. But in a video from the conference, remember, you can actually look for video. In a video from the conference, he points out that recent heat waves across Europe are the main reason for the meat consumption decline. Now, before we move on, recent heat waves across Europe are the main reason for meat consumption decline. Why is this important? Why is it important that we get this absolutely correct? Because most of the people who are sharing this, who are vegans or people who are involved in the animal protection movement, and make no mistake, this was shared over 10,000 times. Most of us actually shared this article, and the headline that actually was very, very inaccurate, as a sign of victory. People are eating less meat, but we're not eating less meat for lack of trying. We're not eating less meat because we want to. The decreased consumption was a product of heat waves across Europe. And therefore, this is a product of climate change. This is actually a much more dangerous thing than we understand it to be, because it's a signifier of what's ahead for the environment as we loom ever closer to climate collapse. So just looking at the video actually provided us with with evidence. Further, Grant admitted in an email, because we emailed him, we said, hey, what you said there don't sound quite right. So Grant admitted in an email that he misspoke in his statement regarding the meat industry across Europe. He said, and I added the emphasis myself, what I meant to say is that the consumption of red meat in some weeks over the last 3 months in the UK have been down 20%. So there's 3 really important things to notice here. What he meant to say was that not that meat consumption had decreased, but it was specifically beef. It was specifically the consumption of red meat, not cows, not chickens, or excuse me, not chickens, not pigs, not fish. It's just the consumption of beef, of red meat, and not over a 3-month period, in some weeks over the last 3 months. And not across Europe, just the UK. The United Kingdom is not the whole of Europe. So 3 very key things here completely change this headline and the text of that article. So it's just red meat. It's only in some weeks, not over the entire summer, not over the entire 3-month period, and only in the UK. Very, very different statement. And we were able to uncover this information with a simple email, and we published a separate article about it. Guess what? Retractions or articles that refute claims that that go against our confirmation biases don't get as much traction. So it's really really important that we get this absolutely correct the first time, because our piece only got like reshared fewer than 300 times versus 10,000. So there are a lot more people out there that are actually believing misinformation and disinformation than people who are actually equipped with the tools to understand the gravity of the situation that we're living with. That's why these things are so important. So now we're going to move on again. False context. I promised you false context. I'm going to give you false context. We're not going to get too deep into this, but like, you know, just a little taste. We're going to give you a little shoulder and then we're going to take it right back. Give you a little leg and then we're going to take it right back. If you want, like, you know, to do a deep dive on any of this stuff, join me later on. Like, message me on Facebook, hit me up on, like, you know, in my email, or join my Patreon. We have conversations like this all the time. False context. Looking at this image, and this is a very, like, you know, this is a very compelling, very provocative image that just emerged in like May or June. Most people were actually sharing this image on social media. What you're looking at is like a Black Lives Matter protest in Ocala, Florida. You've got like a very shorter Black woman who's filming him on her iPhone, and his shirt is off and his torso is covered with like Nazi symbols and tattoos. And so like a lot of people were looking at this image and they, like, you know, were sharing it on social media because it appears to be an act of intimidation. And people were looking at this and saying, oh my God, what a horrible, like, you know, what a horrible tense moment. Is there going to be violence involved? We're like inferring all sorts of things. Does this photo, here's another pop quiz for you. Does this photo require fact checking, or does it require verification? Remember what we know about fact checking, or remember what we know about verification? Like fact checking, like agency, are we going to have to like talk books? Are we going to, like, is there a claim being made here that we need to like adjudicate the truth or the veracity of? Versus verification, like, you know what, is this going to require us to actually engage a different type of skill set? Is this going to require us to actually look for this image, type a Google search in and say, like, you know what, white man, Nazi symbols, Ocala, Florida, white man, Black woman, Nazi symbols, Black Lives Matter. Like, you know what, can we actually put this into a reverse image search and come up with something? Let's check and see what you all came up with. The answer to the poll question is suspense. Does this photo require fact checking? 9% of you said fact checking. 91% of you actually got an A on this test. I'm going to be giving out gold stars to all of you. Yeah, like verification is what this image would require. So like, this is an act of verification. We can put this into a reverse image search. This doesn't require us actually interviewing people who are part of a governing body or an organization, or like, you know, we don't have to consult with any experts. We can look at this image and we can like kind of like figure out where it is. And this is actually really important if you're going to use images in your writing, which most of us will probably do at one point or another. Image attribution. This is courtesy of Dave Miller, and you've also got his Twitter handle at @DMiller. In this current day and age, like, anybody can be a photographer. Any of us can take a picture anywhere and post it on the internet, and that picture is going to, or that photograph is going to take off. This, once again, is why journalism is so important. Because journalism, and in particular photojournalism, really, really means something. In this particular instance, this image was taken by Dave Miller. You've got the actual artist or the actual photographer's name. You've got his Twitter handle. You can track him down. You can find out what the actual context of this image is. And I'll tell you what the context of this image is, because it's actually quite an encouraging and inspiring story. This man was not staring down a Black woman in an act of intimidation. This man actually saw the Black Lives Matter protest, and he approached these people and he took off his shirt and he said, I support you because this is who I used to be and I'm not that person anymore. And so this was an act of like, this was an act of restoration. This was an act of rehabilitation. And this is a woman who's actually filming him because he gave her permission to do so. And she's like going to share this with her friends all over social media, or as many people as she could. Because this was like an incredibly like powerful moment that was captured by a photographer on film. And yet, because of false context, a lot of people shared this on social media with really mean and derogatory comments, especially because he has a lot of mammary fat on his torso that can be reminded of breasts. And so people were making some really nasty comments about his tits, or like, talking about his appearance in a way that that is not very flattering, but like it is such a courageous thing for someone to actually, like, knowing that their body is imperfect, put their body on display for, like, for something that is so meaningful, and for like a fight that is so righteous and good. And this is just another example of false context right here. What you're looking at is a horse that had been injured by protesters during another Black Lives Matter like protest. Some people characterize it as a riot. But again, we don't know the context of this image. We don't know how this horse got injured, or like why this horse was injured. But we know that people can weaponize images based on their pre-existing assumptions about like a thing or an idea or a group of people. And so when we zoom out and we actually look at this image in the context that it was presented from, this is like one of the shares of the image on Facebook. And what you've got here is it being shared by 50 Talent, 50 being like American slang for how we talk about the police. And you see like a police badge in the avatar of the page that it was shared by. And you see some of the comments that people are saying. This is unbelievable, poor animal, the worst kind of human garbage. What the F is wrong with these people? I could say something, but I'm not doing it here. People who are ascribing their own expectations or beliefs about a group of other people in the image. And so like for all we know, like this image, we've got actually an image attribution in the lower left-hand corner. It's like from a local Fox News TV station. But for all we know, this horse had been injured, not by an evil person or a bad person, but like in all likelihood, this horse was injured as a result of like being weaponized by the police against protesters in a crowd. And a lot of terrible things can happen in a crowd of people. And what we also know to be true is that like police have, and like historically and in current circumstances, been using horses as weapons to trample protesters. So like it is really unlikely that somebody actually just decided to take their aggressions out on a horse, but it was more than likely an act of self-defense. But again, being able to weaponize images, we can't always control what happens to images after they leave our hands, but sharing as much information about an image as possible in the context of what we're writing is one of the things that is available to us. So things like this don't happen. Of course, yeah, people can crop out that the little logo in the lower left-hand corner, and people can like reuse the image in however way that they want to. So we can't protect completely or fully against false context, but we can do what we can as authors and as writers to make sure that we minimize it to the best of our ability. And here's the part about evaluating sources. Yay! Really super important. This is actually an article from South End News Network. It says Dick Van Dyke is condemned over blackface appearance in Mary Poppins. And like I actually took a screenshot capture of this because I thought it was incredibly fun. I cropped out the person's name, but you can see that this person is very upset about it. WTF, he played a chimney sweeper who had soot on his face. This is going way too damn far. And you see people are very angry about it. Someone else had actually shared it. At the time that the screen capture was taken, it was actually just like one share and like 2 angry faces. I actually checked back on this post last week because the person did not take it down, and it had actually been shared several more times, and there were up to 30 angry faces on it. But what is South End News Network? If we actually go to check out our source, like let's look at the article itself. Unlike The Independent, you got South End News Network across the top. And then you've got the title of the article, but there's no more information. There's no author for this piece. There is no attribution for it. There's no date or anything. It's just information that was put out there on the internet. So that's from the piece itself. Let's zoom out and look at the South End News Network website proper. So you've got the main page for the website. Again, there's not a lot of information here. I cropped out the ads and the banners and everything, but you've got some really dubious headlines, and you have a couple of dates, but like not all over the place. So if you actually go to the contact page or go to the about page, the about SSN, you'll find out that they are satire. You'll find out that this is actually not real information. It's information meant to entertain. And I thought that was a pretty funny headline because it would be absurd to think that Dick Van Dyke was engaging in blackface because he was a chimney sweep with soot on his face. So yeah, like the examples of why we need to evaluate our sources, there's just no shortage of them, especially since what we know about, like, you know, social media is that more than 60% of users don't actually read past the headline. And this is from a study that was done by Columbia University and the National French Institute, I believe. I should probably check my own sources on that. But yeah, like 60% of people don't actually read past the headline. Confirmation of bias once again strikes. And so this is just what happens with, like, you know, with articles. We see something, we kind of agree with it, we have an emotional response to it, and we share it based on that. And we use the people who are part of our networks as an extension of our vetting process, which is a really dangerous thing to do, because based on our own little filter bubbles, those people probably already think the same way that we do. And so, like, yeah, like, it's a really poor system that we have set up for ourselves cognitively. But this is just the way that humans are wired. So we have to be constantly vigilant of that. Moving on, I just wanted to share with you a couple of fact checkers and some tips to identify disinformation. The top 5 sites that I've got listed here, these will be included in the write-up about this later on. So those links will be dropped for you. You've got PolitiFact, that is one of my favorites, factcheck.org. You've got Snopes, which is the great grandmammy of all of the fact-checking websites. It's been around doing this ever since, like, you know, like heck was a pup. MediaBiasFactCheck.com, that is one that I actually go to quite often. If you type in almost any news source, you'll be able to see like where their biases are and how much factual information they publish. Some of them are very good, some of them are very bad. Pointer.org is a journalist's resource that you can use as well. Again, these are my top 5 favorites. And this here is actually, like, this might be hard for you to read if you are just like looking at this on your mobile device. So try to zoom in using your fingers. And if you are just listening in on the call and you are not actually able to look on the screen, what you've got here is you've got like a diagram or like an actual chart that shows, like, you know, axes of like all of the main news organizations that we can that we have access to. This is brought to you by Ad Fontes Media. That's actually at the bottom of the screen, and this was from 2018, which I didn't realize until after I had actually grabbed the screen capture, because when I was looking at some of these sources, I realized that some of them didn't look quite where I expected them to be. And the reason for that is because this is not a static list. Things are going to shift, obviously, because news sources are like dynamic things. They're not like, you know, we continually have to prove our reliability about the information that we provide. And so there are going to be shifts about, like, you know, like about whether or not this is a trusted source. I personally, like, where CNN is currently located on this chart, it's actually moved since 2018 further to the left. So it's more partisan than it was before. And the analysis is fair, but it's not the most like direct factual reporting. And MSNBC is also skewed far to the left. So when you're looking at, for example, Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow, they are not your friends, or maybe they are your friends, too much your friends. And they're less about like actual reporting and more about punditry. So be wary of those things. Check out the top green box that you actually see up there. And you've got some of the like the heavyweights in the game. These are the most trusted sources that you can look at for when you're writing your pieces or when you're referencing material yourself. You've got the Associated Press, you've got Reuters, Bloomberg, C-SPAN, NPR, the Los Angeles Times, the top 3 networks. You've got ABC, NBC, and CBS in the United States. Politico. You also have the Guardian in the green box, the New York Times and the Washington Post. And if you are slightly right of center, but still very, very neutral, you've got the Wall Street Journal, which I actually subscribe to. You've got the Economist and the FT, the Financial Times, also there in the UK, and Forbes. So yeah, like check out that list and notice where your main news sources are located. Like wherever it is that you primarily consume your news from, make sure that that you're consuming at least a couple of very credible news sources that are located in that green box. Even BuzzFeed is in that green box, which has done some remarkable reporting in the past 2 to 3 years, I have to say. Notice also what is not in the green box, which, like, that's like the less nutritious stuff for you to consume, like news-wise and intellectually. But but it's okay to eat a little junk food, every once in a while. So it's all right to have your Rachel Maddow's and your Anderson Coopers, but just don't make that the main course, if you will. And you'll see in the lower left-hand corner, you've got Patriobotics and Palmer Report. I loathe when I see people sharing things from Palmer Report. And in the lower right-hand side of the box, hyper-partisan, alt-right propaganda. You've got Breitbart, InfoWars, the Daily Caller, and the Daily Wire. So those are the news sources that you want to avoid. Fox News, super low down on the list. And shockingly, it's like super popular with people. Fox News is actually the most popular and most watched news network in the United States, which is much to my chagrin. Thank you, Roger Ailes, for doing that to us. You have broken democracy. Separate discussion, bring it back, Sebastian, bring it back. Don't go there yet. So yeah, just be mindful of where your news is coming from. And just make sure that you consume as much as possible from that top green box. And that's also going to be one of the tools that's like, in the write-up about this later on, you'll be able to reference this and like look for the more current versions of it yourselves. And we're coming up on the end of the presentation here. One of the last things that I want to talk to you about is, again, why we do this. And like I'll explain that to you in greater detail, but I actually singled out the Washington Times, the National Review, and the New York Post for this portion because I actually see people sharing quite liberally on social media from these sources, in particular the New York Post. And I usually let it slide, but sometimes I actually tell people, hey, I kind of wish that you wouldn't actually share things from, say, the New York Post, because that's an incredibly poor source. And they'll come back to me, sometimes condescendingly, sometimes graciously, but like I so frequently get the question from people, well, why not? Is the information true? And it's like, well, yeah, sometimes the information is true. Most of the time, in fact, the information is true. Because of the articles that you specifically are sharing, not that like the information writ large from the New York Post is true. But that is not the point. The point is that it's a bad source. If you can find something on the New York Post that happens to be true, you can find it somewhere else. You can find it from a better source. Don't share it from these places. Don't share it from these incredibly bad and toxic places. And the reason for that is, like, number one, you're going to like absolutely positively cause me to drink and possibly shoot people. I'm not even trying to lie. Like, it's like, it makes my life so much harder. Like, y'all are out here on Al Gore's internet doing these incredibly dangerous things, and you are making me older. You are like really, really increasing my blood pressure, and you are going to put me into an early grave. You don't want to do that. What the Columbia Journalism Review actually said about the New York Post in 1980 is the New York Post is no longer merely a journalistic problem, it's a social problem. It is a force for evil. The New York Post is a source for evil. Well, Sebastian, that was written 40 years ago. All right, that's fine. Nothing has changed in 40 years. The New York Post is actually a force for evil even right now. There's an article that was actually written in 2017 from the Columbia Journalism Review by journalist Julia Dahl, What I Learned About Journalism at the New York Post. This is semi-long, I'm going to read it to you, but please listen to every word of what she's saying. On my first day as a freelance reporter for the New York Post, I was sent to Staten Island to talk to a man who had recently been paroled after serving several years on charges related to child pornography. The man, the Post had learned, was enrolled in classes at the College of Staten Island. So she goes out on assignment, and with her team to interview this man. And she approaches him, and I'm not gonna read the whole article, but like the next up, she says, I'm a reporter for the Post. We heard he's enrolled in CSI, and I was wondering, Thomas, the name of the man, who was shirtless, wearing denim shorts, cut me off. Why can't you people leave me alone? I'm just trying to better myself. Why can't I better myself? He started to come toward me into the sunshine, and suddenly Ron appeared, leaning out the window with his camera. Click, 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 and he sped away. Is he with you? Screamed Thomas. What the F? Why can't you leave him alone? Wailed the father, trying to pull his son back into the garage. He's just trying to make a better life. Ron being her photographer that just clips some really quick pictures, again, false context, when he was advancing toward her in possibly a menacing way. And then it goes on to say, it was the first time of many that the people I tried to talk to during the 3 years I was a reporter for the Post said, please, to me in a similar tone. Please, they'd say, my sister was just found murdered. Please, my husband has just been indicted. Please, I've just lost my job. After a while, I learned to wiggle past the pleases and get a quote from my editor. But on that first day, the father's please was enough to shame me, and I ran back to my car. Without a doubt, I had just ruined these two men's day. But what didn't occur to me until years later was how that interaction may have shaped the way they thought about reporters and the entire news media for the rest of their lives. 10 years later, when their president told them the journalists were the enemies of the people and, quote, mainstream media was pumping out fake news, might my daylight notebook and camera ambush have made it more likely they'd nod their heads and say, hell yeah? Hell yeah. One of the things that we need to know is that, like, in journalism and in life, tell everyone you know, if you take nothing else away from this presentation, we don't use the term fake news. There's either news or it's just not news. There's no such thing as fake news. And actually integrating fake news into the common vernacular is one of the things that erodes our institution. And allowing these interactions and allowing this toxicity into the discourse has poisoned the minds of so many people. So when we talk about the importance of fact checking, when we talk about the importance of what it is that we do as writers, like, it cannot be overstated. If you are participating in this, like in this presentation because you are a journalist for Sentient Media, you carry the weight and the gravity of that in everything that you write. You're not just an ambassador for Sentient Media. You're not just an ambassador for animals or for animal rights. You're an ambassador for journalism in the larger sense. And you're not just an ambassador for those things either. You are a person who is tasked with carrying on traditions of honesty and decency and integrity. That's what you have to do. Whether you are a writer or a journalist or not, that's who you are expected to be. And it's immeasurably important right now because of the universe that we're living in, because of the socio-political world and times that we are living in. This is a state of emergency right now. We literally have people dying in the street because they don't believe in factual, true information. And the lack of credibility that we currently have is fueled in part by the lack of due diligence that people do in their own fact checking and in their own verification lives. So this is something that is relevant to us, whether we are like, whether we're part of this universe or not. We all hold this obligation and this responsibility. So when we finish this presentation and we go out there into the rest of the world, we have to remember that if we've learned nothing else from this presentation. So that's it. I'm wrapping up. That's it. That's the speech. That's the tweet. Thank you all for participating. Remember to stay skeptical. There's a quote from Marla Rose's son. If you all are familiar with Marla Rose, she runs Vegan Street. He actually said something about coleslaw, about skepticism. He actually said that, like, skepticism is like coleslaw. It's good to balance out the plate, but don't try to build a meal out of it. So yeah, like, you know, one of the most important things that we can walk away from this is by saying that, like, yeah, like, you know what, don't allow misinformation to create so much doubt in your mind that we don't know what to believe, because that is the most dangerous place to be in. Thank you all, and thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Sebastian. We have so many messages coming in saying thank you so much for sharing that, and that last stirring speech, you're absolutely right, and we all need to be paying attention to this going forward in all of the writing that we do, whoever we are and whatever we're writing for. Sebastian, do you have time to take a question? We still have a majority of the audience here. We could
I most certainly do.
Yeah, we could just do one quick one.
Yeah.
There's some great points and some great interesting questions. But the first that I think we'll go with, could you elaborate more on the difference between fact and truth? Is fact information that can be demonstrated indisputably with data, whereas truth involves some subjective interpretation that may be based on a person's perspective on factual information?
Oh, wow. Like that pretty much nailed it. Like you answered the question in your own, like in your own question. Like, yeah, facts are indisputable. Like or excuse me. Yeah, like facts are indisputable. A fact is that the world is like the world is round. The world is not flat. That's factual information. We have tangible, like scientific evidence that absolutely backs that up. Um, I'm trying to think of an example of something that may be true. But again, it's more difficult because, like, facts can be a part of truth. It is my objective truth that, like, we live in a racist society in the United States, but that's my objective truth as a Black person. But if you are a white person who has never experienced anti-Black racism and, like, and don't encounter it in your everyday life, then it's your objective truth that, like, no, we don't live in a racist society. Or maybe it's your objective truth that there's racism, but you wouldn't characterize the society writ large in the United States as racist. And so, like, yeah, there can be multiple truths, but there cannot be multiple facts. I hope that makes sense.
That does make sense. I'm just going to give you one more, if you don't mind. This is a quick one. So thinking
Sure.
about quotes, how comfortable? So you did list your list of sites that people can go to verify, like Snopes and stuff like that. But how comfortable are you with relying on those well-known sites as evidence that this is a verified quote?
Yeah. I wouldn't, like, there are lots of quote sites on the internet. Definitely stay away from the quote sites because most of them, or many of them, I should say, are actually quote generators. So you can just type in any old thing and come up with a quote. And a lot of them will actually catch on. I'm very comfortable with going to PolitiFact or like Pointer or Media Bias Fact Check or Snopes. What's really funny is that, like, in the current universe that we, like, that we all exist in, even though these are, like, unto themselves institutions, a lot of people actually doubt them as well. And that's what I mean by, like, skepticism. Like, what, like one of the most insidious things that's happened, particularly on social media, is that, like, a lot of us think that, like, the goal of disinformation campaigns or of the disinformation economy is to get you to believe something else. And that's not actually the goal. The goal of disinformation campaigns is actually to get you to not believe anything at all, or to question everything to the degree that, like, you just can't imagine what is, like, factually true versus, like, what is absolute fiction. Yeah, like, but and part of that, I'm sorry, like, as I go off on a tangent, but part of that sowing of doubt is that, like, these institutions, like these fact checking sites, are now being questioned. People are like, oh, well, who funds Snopes? Where's their money coming from? It's like, well, this is the same site that's actually been in existence for ages now. Well, who funds PolitiFact? And it's like, well, that's a very good question to ask, but, like, what? Apply that same skepticism in other places. So yeah, like, these are the ones that I think of as tried and true. These are the ones that I would look at most reliably, and in particular for quotes from, like, political figures.
Final question. Obviously, people are just going to disappear throughout this, but I don't care. I'm going to keep going. Final question. So there's so much content out there, and so much obviously on social media and news sites. Like you say, you don't necessarily know if the news site is a satire site or a genuine site, and then the image gets taken and turned into, as if it's truth. Like, how much time should we be spending on verifying all stuff? Like, should it be that, like, if we're retweeting or sharing a post on Facebook, that we should be going deep into finding the truth in that before we share it? Like, how much should we be doing this?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. All of these are really great questions. The answer that I could give, the most productive answer that I could give, is that, like, you'll have to spend a lot of time in the beginning, but you'll spend less and less time, like, verifying or, like, fact checking as, like, as things progress or as things go on. Why? Because you're going to find out what your trusted sources are and who your trusted sources are. Like, you'll probably notice that I don't do a lot of retweeting or, like, resharing things on my own social media pages. And the reason for that is because, like, there's a lot of stuff out there that I don't trust. In fact, like, 80% of it I don't trust. If I see something that's on a meme, I am certainly not going to believe that. Like, if I see somebody, like, that actually said something that, like, that I find to be true, yeah, I'm probably going to be, like, if somebody said something funny or like, if it's a joke, or like, or something like that, like, yeah, I'll be more inclined to share it. But when it comes to like, when it comes to like information sites, or when it comes to stories or articles, I'm going to be much more judicious with that. But like, but yeah, like when I see something that is from, say, the New York Times, or when I see something that's from the Guardian or from like the Wall Street Journal, I'm probably going to be more inclined to believe it. But even with those sources, you have to vet them as well, because everything that you see in the Wall Street Journal isn't necessarily an article. I'm not going to reshare most opinion pieces. So you have to be conscious of what part of the paper this is coming from, how this like, piece is categorized. Is it categorized as an editorial, or is this categorized as actual news? These are important questions to ask before you share anything. So like that's the advice that I would give people. You'll spend a lot of time in the beginning trying to fact check things and like, and verify them. But once you establish those credible sources, you will always know what those credible sources are, and you'll have to do it less and less.
Really great answer. And another thing just popped up here, Rachel Maddow. So when she presents facts and then she presents her opinions, do you trust her facts, or does her opinions kind of make you question her facts even when she's presenting a fact?
I talk a lot of trash about Rachel Maddow, but she's actually one of my favorite people. I don't watch her, but like I listen to her podcast maybe like 2 or 3 times a week. And her podcast is just like a replay of the of the episodes of her show. What's really interesting is that the factual information is written by a team of journalists that are like beyond reproach. But then you have the punditry that follows. And so, like I said, it's okay to consume this as long as you know what it is that you're consuming. Don't consume it as your primary sources of information. Consume it as entertainment, because that's ultimately what it is. The second that the actual factual story is told, like that's the end of the fact. And then all of the supposition and all of the punditry is introduced after that time. So just be aware of that when you are watching Rachel Maddow or Anderson Cooper or whatever, you pick your poison. But yeah, consume it the way that it is intended, and don't try to look at it as like objective journalism, the way that we imagine objectivity to be in this world.
And that's the danger when somebody's retweeted something and then it goes down and down and down the trail to the point where you're retweeting it without even knowing who Rachel Maddow is or what her political agenda is. So yeah, right. That's a great answer. I don't want to stop, but how do you, this is a great question, and then I'll let you go and get on with your evening. How do you handle scientific uncertainty when communicating in mainstream media?
I would need a bit more context for that question. How do you handle scientific uncertainty when confronted within a mainstream media? Like the way that I'm interpreting that question right now, I've got a good example for it. Like there is a lot of scientific uncertainty around COVID, and and the coronavirus, and people kind of feel like they don't know what to believe, and I feel like that's really unfortunate. Because it's like that scientific uncertainty, like in many ways, like I've seen somebody else write it way better than I can say it, but what it means is that we're actually watching the scientific process play out in real time, and we're not used to seeing that. We're used to seeing something that is presented as as fact, like after the scientific process has been completed. But we don't actually have time for that, because we're living in a universe where we have to share information at breakneck speed as long as we know it. And sometimes the more current information contradicts the information that we knew at an earlier time. We know a lot more about how the virus is transmitted now than we did 4 months ago. And that's a good thing. But because it contradicts earlier information, a lot of us are skeptical about it because we don't know what the scientific process looks like. And so that's not necessarily a failing of our critical thinking skills, but we haven't been taught to look at it in that way. So the scientific uncertainty is actually just something that is part of the process, and we should treat it as such. And when we're given new information, we need to retrain our brains to actually internalize that information, as long as it's good information and coming from a credible and reputable source, and accept it and move on to on to the next. And when we learn new information, like internalize that as well. All of us like thought that we knew that milk was just good for us at one point. And then one day it's like, holy smokes, it's actually not. And there's a lot of scientific evidence out there that like tells us what milk actually is and whether or not we need it for strong bones. And now I have new information and I've chosen to internalize that information. And like, you know, and move on and learn more. So like, yeah, like that's how I would treat like scientific uncertainty, especially in these like really uncertain times that we're living in.
Thank you so much, and thank you for staying on the line longer.
Yeah,
it's been super valuable. Your energy and your passion and everything that you've said is super useful, and I hope that the people who have stayed around have enjoyed it, and we'll be sharing this online over the next couple of days, so those who couldn't attend can check it out. You're a star, and this has been awesome. I just want to do a quick thing for a quick shout out for the next Sentient Sessions, which is called You're Published, Now What? Where I'll be talking to the New York Times bestselling author and branding extraordinaire expert, Neil Patel, influencer and producer of The Invisible Vegan, the amazing Jasmine Weaver, and animal activist and social media influencer, John Oberg. And that is on Thursday, the 27th of August at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So looking forward to that. And thank you again, Sebastian, and thanks everyone for being here. We'll speak soon.
Thank you.